Hello, and thank you for being here today for our 5th annual Montclair Literary Festival. I'm Jacqueline Morose, the festival director. I want to thank all of our volunteers and festival sponsors today, including Rayo's Homemade, Montclair State University, West of Hudson Realty, Jill Williams of Mindful Wealth Management, Ameriprise, Deirdre and Colbert Narcisse, the Coronis Family Foundation, and all of our festival friends. And thank you also to the Montclair Public Library and Watchung Booksellers. Our festival benefits Succeed Together, a nonprofit based in Montclair that provides free educational services to underserved children. If you have a question for today's speakers, you can click on the Ask a Question bar on the bottom of your screen, or you can write it in the chat. Our authors appear for free, so please support them by purchasing their books. Today's book can be purchased by clicking on the link below. We are thrilled to welcome these two authors today who will be speaking about the fascinating story of Belle da Costa Greene, who is J.P. Morgan's personal librarian. Welcoming back Laurie Albanese, an award-winning author whose novels about women, art, and self-discovery are widely praised, book club favorites. Her 2017 novel, Stolen Beauty, was lauded by the Wall Street Journal as a work of art itself. Laurie's forthcoming new novel, Hester, is a first-person fictional account of the real Hester Prynne's love affair with Nathaniel Hawthorne. Sorry, Laurie. She'll be in conversation with Victoria Christopher Murray, an acclaimed author with more than 1 million books in print. She has written more than 20 novels, including Stand Your Ground, a Library Journal Best Book of the Year. And she holds an MBA from the NYU Stern School of Business. Welcome, both of you, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Hi, Victoria.
Hey, Laurie, how are you?
I am so thrilled to be here and tell everyone about your book, which I want everyone I know to read. I think it's such an amazing book. And I think it's really an important book, and it's a book for our time. So let me just, as an introduction, read the blurb, if you don't mind, this on the front. And this is from Teresa Ann Fowler. She says, now the protagonist of the book, her name is Belle da Costa Greene. So she says that Belle denied her true identity in order to protect herself and her family from racial persecution speaks not only to her time, but also to ours. This is a compelling and important story. So, So Belle, can you just tell us about Belle, please? Belle da Costa Greene, born Belle Marion Greener.
Yes, she was born Belle Marion Greener. She was the daughter of Richard T. Greener, who was the first African-American to graduate from Harvard. But when he graduated, he became an activist. He was a civil rights activist who really pushed for the Civil Rights Act of 1875 and just getting equal rights for white and colored, as Black people were called back then. And she was the daughter of Genevieve Fleet, who came from a family that was a long history of freed Blacks. They lived in Washington, D.C., in an area that still exists today called the Gold Coast. And they were all very well educated. All of the women were teachers, the men were engineers. And so she was their daughter. And she lived as their daughter until her teenage years.
Yeah, she was one of many siblings, right?
Yes. She had 2 older sisters and a brother and a sister younger than her.
And then in her teen years, something happens.
Yes.
That is very cataclysmic for the family, right?
Yeah. And that's when I always say as a teen, she came to the crossroads. So what happened was the Civil Rights Act of 1875 was overturned. And that was the beginning that was the end of Reconstruction, I should say, and the beginning of segregation and the rise of white supremacy and the Ku Klux Klan and all of that. And so her mother, who had been in the fight for civil rights with her father, because her mother, and people will learn in the book, traveled with him to South Carolina, something she would have never done. She really believed in the fight for civil rights. Once it was overturned by the Supreme Court, she saw the writing on the wall, and she told her husband, we will never be equal. We will never be equal now. The Supreme Court has said we are not equal, and so we have to use our advantage. We have to use everything we can to give our children the best advantage. Because her father could have passed as well. And so when her mother said, okay, it's time for us to pass because we fought the good fight, but it's over, he said no. He said, absolutely not. We keep fighting. And he wanted to keep fighting for his children, and she wanted to give her children equality now. So the family split, and Belle went with her mother along with all of her siblings.
So for our audience, what are the years that we're talking about? Because I will admit, perhaps which I'm a little loath to admit, I did not know about the passage of the Civil Rights Act in 1865. And so the years that we're talking about are really a shock. So what year was she born?
Yeah, she was born in the 1880s. So it was after the passage. So she was born during that really good time of hope. Of hope in this country that everyone was going to be equal. There were African Americans being elected to office and everything. We were given all kinds of roles. And so that's what the period we're talking about, the late 1800s. But the story begins in the early 1900s. But the history of it, when her mother reported them as white on the census, I believe it was 1890. It may have been a little sooner.
1905, I wrote in my notes.
The first time that she reported them? Okay,
in the census.
Okay, because they moved to New York. And they had been almost living as whites. The mother chose where they would live, and people assumed that they were white. And so they were kind of gradually moving towards that. But the father didn't. Richard T. Greener had been out in the world trying to save America that he didn't notice until the census, and then it was over.
And he was, I think that's such an interesting and tragic sort of backstory, how these people who really loved each other, Richard and Genevieve, how they chose different routes because of what society had imposed on them. They both wanted equality, but they had to pursue it in different ways.
And I think people do that. I think he was fighting for his children. And she, in her way, fought for her children. They started out in the same place. So that's what I always want people to understand, because I think people looking at Genevieve with 21st century eyes would say, why did you do that? But they started out in the same place. She was a fighter for civil rights. Women didn't have the prominent roles that men had. But her mother wanted it. But her decision was, I don't want to be white. I want to be equal. And this is the means to get there. And her father was like, we keep fighting.
So then we have Belle, and she's at Princeton when we meet her, right? Tell us about that trajectory.
Yes, and it's very important that she's at Princeton when we meet her. Not only because that is where she was, and that's where she met J.P. Morgan's nephew, who really introduced her to J.P. Morgan, but I think it's very important because Princeton was the only Ivy League college that was still all white.
Oh, wow.
It was the only one that was still whites only. And so it's very important for us to meet her there so we can see the kind of environment that she was living in. So from the beginning, we see her walking a tightrope before she meets J.P. Morgan, even though it's very early in the novel when she meets J.P. Morgan. But it's very important that she was at Princeton.
And she's at the library. She's working.
She was a librarian, and she was working with rare manuscripts and arts. And so she had already learned a lot about that.
she was brilliant. I love the way she studies art in Bernard Berenson's book of Renaissance artists. And then, is that true? You put that in there?
Story. That's a true story. She was 10 years old when she received a gift. I think it was from her father, but I think in the book we had it from her grandmother, something else. But she received a gift of the Renaissance art that was authored by Bernard Berenson, and she's 10.
Yeah.
Having no idea that that man will become the love of her life.
Which is just unbelievable. I don't want to jump ahead too much. I really want to talk about Bernard, but I want to talk about how when she meets J.P. Morgan, what their chemistry is. And because I think that at the heart of the book, you do say that he was the love of her life, right? In a way. I mean, of course, Bernard was her lover, but he was the love of her life. And they connect on such a profound level. And you've done such a beautiful job of showing that to us. How did you embody that? Because he's this, towering figure, and she's this brilliant, but woman making her way in the world.
And she was in her 20s. She was a very young woman when she met him. The first thing I really must say is that I wrote this book with Marie Benedict. And it was actually Marie's idea to do this book. She's a historical fiction writer. I'm a contemporary writer. So we were in opposite worlds. But she felt that in order to do justice to Belle da Costa Greene, that her story needed to be told by a Black woman and a white woman. So she sought me out. So I think that's very important.
Thank you. Yeah.
Because this was her idea, her baby.
Yeah.
And so I mention her here because how we came to that is every single chapter we wrote in that book, Marie and I discussed first.
Yeah.
And so we had, and because we were stuck at home under the pandemic, we talked every day by Zoom. And so we could talk about, there were facts that we knew. We knew what kind of man he was. That's his character's very public. We knew who she was and how she would have to be trying to balance both worlds. And so we had the fact of the interview. We know the day that they interviewed, and we know she was hired.
Yeah.
But we don't know what went on in between. And that was the fiction part that Marie and I really discussed based on their characters.
Yeah.
And so and I think we captured it, it's still our story, but I think we captured it. And we knew he was a collector of things. He was a womanizer. He was the most powerful man in the country. He was more powerful than the president. He saved this country a couple of times from financial disaster. And so we know that kind of power. And she was a very petite, very smart, very sharp woman. And so what would their interactions have been? She was also under, this is going to sound harsh. This is not what I mean. I can't think of another word. She was also under the thumb of her mother, who was teaching her children how to pass. Who gave birth. And so her mother's words were always in her mind.
There was so much tension in that as well. My goodness, thank you for mentioning Marie Benedict. I want to back up here and talk about that, talk about the collaboration between the two of you and how you came to the story and what perspective and what your personal experience is as a Black woman. Also, you live in DC, which is where
her family lived.
But what personal experiences you brought to embody Belle, who is so vividly portrayed. I mean, she's so intimate on the page, Victoria. I think that is a real accomplishment of the story. And how you brought your experience as a Black woman to her story in the book. I'd love to hear that.
It was easy. People ask that question often, and it was very easy for me on a couple of levels. First, my grandmother, who was very fair, and I think I mentioned to you that we used my grandmother's picture for Marie. The writings so she could picture Genevieve and what she would have looked like. So my grandmother was very fair, and though she didn't pass as a lifestyle, she used to say she would pass for convenience. So, for example, if she went into the bank and they assumed she was white, she never corrected them because she always would get better service. So we've had lots of stories about that in my family. It wasn't just that, with some of her siblings, but some of her siblings are darker than me, that we come in all shades in a single family. So I knew that. And then I told Marie, my favorite poem in the world is a poem called We Wear the Mask by Paul Laurence Dunbar, an amazing poem that talks about African Americans wearing a mask every day.
Yeah.
And since I have been old enough to understand race, I have worn a mask. I've worn this mask with my parents, my mom and my dad in my ears saying, you know, always do this, always sit up straight, always speak clearly, all of those kinds of things. And you get home or you get around your friends and you're a different way. Today it's called code switching, but it's really wearing a mask. So I understood. I was not passing the way Belle was passing, but I understood the mask that she wore.
Yes.
And so it was very easy for me to get into her mind.
Yeah.
And how she would feel every day being in certain situations. She was the only woman in the room so often.
Yeah, she had a lot of burdens on her. She's the only woman. She's in a sexist world. She's hiding her identity. And the way she does that, the way you have her dressing so fashionably and so colorfully, to say, and she's saying, I'm dressing colorfully. She's saying in her mind, because if they're going to look at me, I want them to notice something else. I want them to see something else.
Yeah, look at how flamboyant I am in my dress, so you don't notice my skin tone.
Yeah.
Because if you look at articles that were written about Belle at that time, although they talked about her brilliance and how she built up J.P. Morgan's collection, they always mentioned that she was a little odd looking. They used all kinds of words. They used words like tropical or dusky complexion. There was always a question. And so she said, and we believe she said, because she burned all her papers, and we can talk about that.
Yeah.
We believe she said, you know what? They're going to look at me anyway, so let me take the attention away from my skin tone to my dress, to my quips, to outrageous and flamboyant behavior. And then maybe they'll stop talking about my skin tone.
Yeah, you do use that. The word tropical is used several times as a threat.
Yes.
To her. You look very tropical, Belle.
Yes.
Where is your family from again?
Yes, we found a little obscure. When I learned how to do all the research, I got into it. I couldn't stop. And found this little tiny article where somebody wondered if she was from Cuba. And that would explain her tropical roots.
And she said her family was from Portugal.
Yes,
right?
That again was her mother, who made up some Portuguese grandmother out there to take away, to explain.
Yeah.
So if anybody ever questioned her directly, she could say, well, I'm Portuguese. Of course I would have this dusky complexion, because don't all Portuguese have that?
Right. Yeah. So this idea of sort of wearing a mask and the burden that her mother, I mean, it's interesting because her mother did, you said she was under her mother's thumb, but her mother was always there sort of warning her, something that I hear my Black friends talk about now, which is you feel like you have to be twice as good. You have to be twice as good, twice as careful, right? And I think that was really interesting because Belle had so much pressure on her, right? And because she burned all of her papers, you had to, or you got to, it's kind of a gift to the writer.
Yeah, it's a gift to a fiction writer.
Yeah, oh, excuse me. Absolutely. It's a gift to a novelist. Yeah, very much so. You have to be twice as good. So,
and that's what her mother had beat into them. I mean, we don't have that in the book, but I know it as a child, because my grandmother would have been, I guess, Belle's mother's age.
Mhm.
And so that was beaten into
Yeah.
us. You have to be twice as good.
Not literally, figuratively.
Right.
Not literally beaten into you, figuratively.
Oh, yes, thank you. Yes, definitely. Just kind of put into my mind constantly.
Right. And her mom is there telling her all the time, be careful, be careful, be careful. And that inhibits her so that she gives so much of her life to the library and her, what she sees as her cause and her mission in life, which is the other part of the book. Like the book wears two hats, and one is about her identity and her racial identity, but the other is what she does to build up the library. And I love all of that. And that is just as important in many ways to the reader, because she's building up his library, the J.P. Morgan Library. So can you talk about that, about how she approached that role and what she brought to it?
Yeah. And so that was where Marie's expertise came in, because she majored in history in college. So she knew a lot, but I learned a lot of it through her and through doing it. One of the things is, a lot of people will wonder what was her educational background.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know a lot about that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, we haven't been able to find out exactly where she was. It's kind of murky. We don't know if it was kind of erased from history, as she was trying to erase so much about herself.
Yeah,
because a lot of people would have still kind of known her as a Black person in her teen years. So don't know a lot about that, but we do know that she got excellent training at Princeton.
Right.
While she was working there, because she was in an apprentice kind of position,
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the rest of it, she learned on the job, including the language, because there were things that he did not ask her to do. JP did not ask her to do, but she did on her own.
Yeah. And she's pursuing all these rare manuscripts, right?
Yes.
And the way, oh my God, it was as good as the Queen's Gambit. The way she walks into the room and sort of gets all the men under her thumb and then goes for it, right?
Yeah.
It reminded me of the Queen's
But I think women do that anyway. I think when we walk into a room, we have to read the room.
Yeah.
Because not only are we very often the only woman in the room, but we are definitely in the minority in those kinds of situations. And I think that that's something that we've learned to do as women, to just kind of read the room.
Mm-hmm.
We can't just walk in all, lackadaisical. There's a lot of things that go in before that.
Right.
And she did all of that.
She's very aware of being underestimated, but she's clever enough to do that, to use that to her advantage.
Yeah.
Because I guess what you're saying is we know how to do that, right?
We know how to do that.
Yeah.
I think she knew how to do it on one level as a woman. And then her mother always was telling her, this is what you have to do. This is what you have to see. And then once she started working for JP, he taught her a lot of that.
Oh, yeah. How to negotiate.
How to negotiate, how to look out for your enemies, how to keep your enemies close.
Yes.
And so they had a really interesting relationship, because not only was she his employee, but she was his protege when it came to the art world. And she I won't say that she knew more than him, but what she did do was she put together an art collection that made sense.
Mm-hmm.
He was collecting haphazardly.
Yes.
And she went in strategically.
Yeah. And you worked with the Morgan Library, right? You did research there. You have beautiful scene setting there. What was that like? I mean, I feel like, if I may, what I got from the book and what I know of the library is that she kind of made a collection that tells us the history of the printed word.
Yes.
Right.
That's what I've learned from writing this book.
Yeah.
The history of the printed word. Yes, Marie and I went to the Morgan Library. That's where Marie got the idea. Used to visit the Morgan Library 20 years ago. And the docent told her that J.P. Morgan did not build that collection alone, that he had done it with a woman.
Uh-huh.
So the docent had only told her a woman. It was years later when Marie found out that
Yeah.
it was an African-American woman.
Yeah. So the reason Marie found out years later, we talked about this the other day, is because Belle's identity, Belle lived and died in public as a white woman. And it wasn't, tell me the story about that. Tell our audience.
It wasn't until she passed away that people found out her true identity. She passed away in 1950, and it was decades later when papers were found from her father. The one thing that Belle could never do was to she had to make sure the connection was never made between her and Richard T. Greener, because he was clearly Black.
Yeah.
And so we know all the trips she took, the dates and everything we have correct. There was one trip that she took in 1913 after J.P. Morgan's passing away, where we don't have any record of why she took that trip. So we're absolutely sure she went to see her father during that time, especially since J.P. had just passed away and she lost that connection to an older man, that kind of direction. And so it wasn't until her father passed away that papers were much later after he passed away, that some of his papers were discovered. And historians got his papers, going through them, not looking for Belle, just looking for everything for this amazing man. And they discovered his children and things. And through that was how the connection was made. And it wasn't until 2007 when a definitive biography was written on Belle da Costa Greene, An Illuminated Life, which Marie and I used a lot in our research, that they finally said, yes, Belle da Costa Greene was Black.
That is such an amazing story. And I love the way you guys jumped on it and turned it into this beautiful account. One thing that, as I've been telling everybody I know to read this book, people ask me, well, there are a few things I want to say. One is that unlike many people who've left behind their family to forge a new identity, she did not have to leave behind her mother and her siblings. They kind of all crossed that line or bridge together. But there's a lot of sadness in that in general, right? But people have been asking me, and I wanted to ask you this. You touched on it before. It's hard for us to understand the choice that Belle and her mother made, partly because we don't understand what was at risk once they made that choice. Like, what was the big deal?
Yeah.
Why didn't she just, first of all, did she have a choice? That's one of my questions for you. But also, what would have happened if she'd outed herself or been discovered?
Yeah.
I would like you to answer that.
Yeah. So, and you're talking about Belle, right? Yeah.
Oh, yes, Belle. Yeah.
Yeah. So, she was a teen. She was in her teens when her mother made this decision, which I think is an amazing time period in your life, because that means that she had lived the first 14, 15, 16 years as a Black girl.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you have to switch so suddenly. And what was at risk? That came from her mother.
Yeah.
Because Belle wouldn't have really understood what was at risk at that time. What was at risk was what is at risk now in today's times. What's so interesting about the timing of us writing this book is that I understood everything that was at risk. But Marie and I were working on the edits during the summer of 2020.
Right.
We had just started working our edits when George Floyd was murdered.
Right.
And so when that happened, and Marie and I think for 2 days we didn't write, but we talked for 6 hours. We talked for 3 hours every day. I think we just talked, both of us in shock and trying to make sense of it. I said to Marie, for anyone who doesn't understand Genevieve Fleet, this is what she saw.
Yeah.
She was in the fight for civil rights, but when she saw the rise of white supremacy, she said, I don't want my children to end up on the wrong side of a cop's knee.
Yeah. Yeah.
And once I said that to Marie, and whenever I say that, people say, wow, I get it.
Yeah.
She saw it. If she came back now today, she would say, see,
Right.
That's what I was talking about.
So that's her mom. But what about, I mean, was it against the law? Were there laws?
They would lynch people.
Yeah.
If they were discovered.
Yeah.
There were women and men who were lynched, who were passing, and when they were discovered, they would be lynched. They would be killed. Belle could not. Once her mother made the decision,
Yes,
she couldn't out herself. She would be outing all of them.
Yes, she would have been outing all of them.
So everybody's life would have been destroyed.
Yeah.
Or if she didn't out all of them, she would have to move far away from them.
Yeah.
Far away from, and so where would she go?
Yeah.
Maybe she could have returned to DC. I know she has that question at some point in that book.
Yeah.
And so she had, and I don't know what the age was, but as a 16-year-old,
yes,
she had no choice. When her father left, she had no choice,
yeah,
none whatsoever.
And there is not, I don't want to do a plot spoiler, but there is a point later in the book when you can see when she might have made that choice. And I'll leave that out there for readers to discover on their own.
Yeah, I think there were times, but at that point, if she were to make that decision, she would have left her mother and her siblings. And whenever because I've had that question from people too.
Yeah.
And I say to them, how many of you at the age of 25, 30, 35 would have walked away from your mother?
Right. Right. And your siblings. And
I have two sisters and my parents. I grew up in this wonderful Leave It to Beaver household like she did.
Yeah.
It would have been hard to walk away from any of that at any age.
A little as an aside, have you read the Andrea Elliott story of Dasani? Dasani and then, okay. Well, she is, let's just say, I bet lots of people have read it. This is an African-American girl who's who's homeless, who gets followed by a journalist. And anyway, she gets a scholarship to go to the Hershey School. This is right now. But to do it, she doesn't have to pass, but she has to leave home. She has to leave the bed that she shared with her sister all of her life. She has to leave it all. And so to me, that's such a present time update
of what this was. Yeah.
Of how hard it is to walk two lines. I don't know.
Because I think Belle would have, I think the thing that we show in the book is her yearning for her father.
Oh, yes.
He never walked away from him. He walked away from them.
Yes. Well, but the mother made the decision. It's hard to even look at that and blame. It's hard to blame them. They're blameless.
Yeah. I think everybody had their right reasons.
Yes. And you've done a great job of showing that in the book. There's so much humanity. One of the things I want to talk about, two more things before we open it up to questions. And one of them is how JP Morgan, it was like, well, was JP Morgan a racist? He doesn't even Black people don't even come into his orbit for him to have to say, but he makes comments about Jews, about Italians.
Yeah, I don't know. So I don't want to call someone that when I don't have it. But based on the comments that we do know he made about Jews, and we do put that in the book, and about other people, I would not be surprised.
Yeah.
If he said, if a Black person had crossed his path in this book, and we had thought about that. We had thought about having that, and then having Belle, how would she have reacted to that?
Yes.
Or having him say something to her.
Yes.
Like that. I would not be surprised if he did not like anyone who didn't look like him.
Yeah. Oh, that reminds me of something we talked about the other day when we were talking, which is how when Belle goes to Europe, when she gets to London, it was a beautiful moment in the book because this idea of the mask we wear, right?
Yeah.
We wear the mask, and she feels when she gets to London differently. Just go ahead and
she feels differently, and her mother the first time they go, because there are people there of all shades, and it doesn't seem to matter.
Yeah.
And England had gotten rid of slavery
before us.
Decades before the United States. And so they were treating people of color very differently. It just didn't seem to matter over there. And
she
didn't feel, and her mother didn't feel. And I think it was the only reason I talk about her mother is because everything that Belle came from the core that she got from her mother. Belle had never heard her mother sing until she was in Europe.
Yeah. They didn't even realize the weight until it was removed.
Yeah.
Of the feeling of carrying the weight of their identity and the white gaze in the street kind of thing.
Yeah.
That was beautiful. The last thing I want to talk about is Bernard Berenson, who we touched on in the beginning, because it fits in with this question of, passing and what, so he was a white man, but
he had his own secrets.
Yes, he had his own secrets. And I think he's her lover, and if we leave it at that, that leaves a lot for people.
Ooh, he's her lover in a very interesting relationship.
Yeah, yes, a very forward.
He's married. We'll just say that and it's not an issue.
Yeah.
So that's we'll leave it.
And that is. I mean, you said you've written romance. There's your book behind you, Lust, that was made into a movie.
Yes.
And that you loved writing, that there was a love story in here.
Yeah, and there's a real love story. I always say to Marie, I don't know if we did their love affair justice, because it was so much back and forth, and he was into his own thing, and just so much stuff going on, that there's one scene in the book that has nothing to do with fact. And it was just, Marie and I had to do something with Bernard because he was getting on our nerves.
Right, exactly.
Until the day she died, they were in contact. And, she told him to burn all of his letters too, to her.
And he didn't, right?
Yeah, he said yes and he didn't. He's a guy. He just did not follow directions very well.
And did you use those letters?
Yes, because now those letters are very important, not only for our story, and that's how we knew some of the things. Like, we understood how J.P. Morgan had become possessive. She was telling Bernard about that. Yeah. And then the depth of their story. But more letters were discovered that will be part of the Morgan Library. And then we're going to all have a chance to read them.
Great.
And just the parts that I've seen so far, I don't know if we even did their relationship justice. I think as well as we did it in the book, I think it was much deeper.
Well, you were following an important storyline about her race, right? That was your primary story.
Yes.
And if you had written it as a love story,
it would be something else.
It would have been something else. I think you give us just enough for us to recognize really what she was giving up by bypassing, by living in the world as a white woman.
We want to show the struggle and the sacrifice.
Yeah. And I mean, he's a great instrument for that because it shows everything. Yeah. Did you say there's going to be an exhibit at the New York Society Library?
No, at the Morgan.
At the Morgan.
In 2024, they will be celebrating their 100th year as a public institution.
Right.
And it was Belle who brought it, because up until she got there, it was his private collection.
Yes.
And he wanted to just show off his friends and everything, but it was his and her thing was always to bring it to the public, because to make it available to everyone. And the thing that I love best, Laurie, about once people read this book, they go to the Morgan Library. Just this morning, someone sent me 2 pictures of the Morgan Library, and they have the personal librarian on display. Yeah, because we got to visit there before we started the book, so that we could put the reader inside the library as we were writing. Yeah. And then our Good Morning America interview was in the Morgan Library.
Yeah, and it's an amazing place. I've visited, but now I'm going to visit with new eyes. Yeah. I love that. And you got to write the Vanderbilt parties. That was also really fun.
That was fun. And
yeah.
those were real. And so we did a lot of research down to the floor plans of the Vanderbilt mansion.
Yeah. Clothing. Oh my God.
We did a lot of research on the clothing.
I really hope they make it a movie because first of all, it would be an amazing movie. And second of all, it would be visually gorgeous.
Yeah. You know? Well, yeah. I'm so happy that the visual part of her story came out on the pages of the book.
Yeah, and it really does. Okay, so I'm going to scroll through our questions. Do you have a picture of her handy?
Let me open it up on my phone very quickly.
Great.
So I will, and I'll show a couple of pictures.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Because you'll see. I hope this will be clear enough. This is one picture of her.
Oh, wow.
And when I put this picture up on social media, people often say to me, how did she pass?
Yeah.
But here's another picture of her.
Yeah. She's very striking. Wow.
Yeah.
Yes. And you can see how she carried herself.
Yes. Even here. This would be something that my grandmother and my mother would have told me. Chin up, shoulders back.
Well, you have her saying that all the time. What does she say to her? What does she say that her mother said?
Chin up, shoulders back. And that is totally from my experience.
Shoulders back. Look them in the eye, right?
In the eye, unless they're a Black person.
Right.
Do not make eye contact with a Black person.
Well, assuming they were not Black people she was meeting in her social sphere.
Yeah.
Right?
But her mother was saying didn't matter. If it was a waiter, if it was a trial in the trolley, if no matter what, don't make eye contact.
Right. And she never really meets any Black people in business.
Yeah. Yeah. She
never.
Wouldn't.
Right.
She wouldn't have.
Okay. So let's see. Judy Dell wants to know, says, I love the book. Will you be collaborating with Marie Benedict again?
Yes. I'm not letting Marie go. I have 30 novels, and this was the most fun I've ever had on any novel because I learned so much.
Yeah.
And then just working with her, she's my sister now. And also we talked probably from April through August, every day rewriting. That was the editing process.
Yeah.
And there's no way, until that was right in the summer of 2020.
Yeah.
And there's no way for a Black woman and a white woman to spend 3 hours together every day and not have them changed. So yes, we're collaborating again. Our next book will be out in 2023.
Oh, nice.
Right now it's called The First Ladies. And it's the story of the friendship between Eleanor Roosevelt and Mary McLeod Bethune. And I
don't know who that is. Who is that?
Okay. Mary McLeod Bethune was an African-American educator who was the first Black person to ever serve in the cabinet. She was in FDR's cabinet because of Eleanor.
Wow.
And I like to think of Eleanor as like the first public ally. I'm sure she wasn't, but she was a public ally. And Eleanor received a lot of pressure to not have that Black woman in the White House and friendship. And Mary McLeod Bethune received a lot of pressure from her side. The NAACP felt that the Roosevelts were just using her to advance some things, and they weren't really listening to her. And they had an amazing friendship.
That's great. I'm so excited for that. Wow. Okay, I think you answered this. Cindy asks, what was Belle's education? And you said, we don't know. Do you have a guess?
No, if I had to guess, she may have gone to college. We have found some references to a teacher's college, but maybe just a couple of years. Because she did not want to be a teacher.
Yeah, her siblings were teachers.
Yeah, because that's what Black people did at the time.
And women too.
Women.
Right? Yeah. Let's see. Did her mother live with her in Princeton?
No, that's a good question. Her mother was in New York, so she was living alone in Princeton, but still very much under her mother's thumb, because even when we have her in Princeton, she can hear her mother's voice. They were not making very much money, so she couldn't go back to New York, even though it's so close. I think it cost 60 cents to take the train. and they didn't have enough money for her to do it all the time, but she did it several weekends. She was living at the home of some people who also worked at Princeton.
Mhm. Right.
She couldn't have lived alone at that time,
Right.
a single woman living alone.
Yeah, that's a big deal. That's actually very interesting the way she handled that in her life, which we will let readers find out. Yeah. Why do you think Belle never married? I mean, this is a question that you addressed. There's two parts. And how did living her life passing complicate her love life and friendships? That's what the book's about, Dee Dee.
That's what the book's about. I know. I almost want to, and I'll just answer the first part. She never married because she couldn't risk having a baby. Black people know this, and in my own family, my grandmother was fair enough to pass, and my grandfather, the man she married, was very, 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 very dark. Mm-hmm. And so their children are the whole spectrum, and you never know what their children are going to come out and how they're going to look. And Belle was already dusky.
Yeah. Oh, here's a good question. Did the spouses of her siblings know they were Black?
No.
That's a question from Fern.
Nobody knew they were Black.
So they married
white people.
Right.
They kept it up. And so we found that to be very interesting because her sisters never had children either.
Oh, they didn't. Wow.
Okay, well, her two oldest sisters didn't have children. Mm-hmm. One got married a little later, and that might be the reason why, because they may be thinking the same thing Belle was. And one had to have a hysterectomy. The brother, we have never been able to find out if he had children. We've still been looking into it. And her youngest sister, who was the fairest of them all in terms of her skin tone and everything, she had two children. She married a white man. They all married white men, or Russell married a white woman. And she got pregnant, and then he got killed in World War I. Mm. And so a part of the story that we hadn't, but we took out, was that Belle, because this is true, Belle and her mother ended up raising the young boy. Belle adopted him, but Bobby passed away in World War II. And then when Teddy remarried, she had a daughter who she named Belle. And Belle died in 2005.
Oh, did you interview or meet is anyone living, any of their descendants?
No. And since we write fiction, if you interview, that means that you're going to kind of put more facts in there, and this is going to be fiction. Also, on that side of the family, we would believe that they're living as white, and they would not have been happy to have us come to them and say something else. So, no, we did not. And we couldn't find anybody anyway, but we're not sure.
So Bet Bland says, I was surprised by the open sexuality. How did you learn of those experiences?
All through research. And, we look at the early 20th century as being very prudish. No, compared to them, we're the ones who are prude.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, all the things that we found in there are true.
Yeah.
Including J.P. Morgan's daughter. So I don't want to say too much about that.
Oh, yeah. That was also interesting. And that might be part of the open sexuality that's mentioned that this reader is commenting on.
Yeah, that's
true. There's a lot of hiding in plain sight going on.
And a lot of people had secrets.
Yeah, a lot of people have secrets now. Yeah. And they definitely did.
They were telling a whole bunch of lies.
Yeah, right. Belle was not the only secret keeper in this bunch.
Ooh, no.
Well, or then you have J.P. Morgan, who's got his mistresses running through the house 3 and 4 at a time, trying to keep them in different rooms.
And the Morgan Library is not that big.
Yeah.
And it was Belle's job to keep one in the library part while one was in his office. It was just crazy.
Yeah, that was pretty crazy. Yeah. Okay, here's a question about the process of the writing. Before the editing process, how did you divide up the writing? Or just, on your collaboration in general, how did it work?
Yes, one of the things I absolutely loved about writing with Marie was I can say every single word of this book we wrote together. So before a chapter started, we would discuss the chapter.
Mm-hmm.
We discussed it at length. Like we had dialogue, what we saw, what we didn't see. And then depending on what the chapter was, if it was one that was very heavy in art,
Mm-hmm.
that was Marie's jam. And mine was, if it was about Belle and her family or about the fashion or anything like that, I would do that. And then whichever parts we wrote, then we switched. So then we sent the chapter to the other one, and then we went in and then made other changes. And then when it became the editing part of it, we actually did that completely together, line by line.
On the phone? Did you?
On Zoom.
In Zoom, yeah, on Zoom. Well, that's why the book reads like one unified voice. And you know, is it similar to the voice that you write with, or did you kind of find that you invented a third person almost?
Yeah, no, it was similar because it was first person. I loved writing in first person. It was the first time I'd ever written in present tense.
Mm-hmm.
But my mind just slipped into it. It wasn't hard at all. And the only challenges I had at the beginning of the book was the language of the early 20th century, because there were times when I wanted Belle to just look at JP Morgan and say, really, dude? And so since this wasn't what she would have said at the time, I used to say that Marie would go in with her magic brush and just her historical brush and then just fix it. One of the things that worked well in this collaboration as well is that Marie's strengths are my weaknesses and vice versa. Marie loves writing a first draft. As quiet as it's kept, as many books as I've written, I hate writing. Writing that first draft for me is like pulling teeth without any medication. But when Marie finishes her first draft, she's ready to just move on. And that's when the process begins for me, and the beauty of what we're able to do as writers. I love doing the second, the third, the fourth drafts and really layering it. So we both had to do parts that we didn't like, but we both brought our strengths to this story.
Yeah, that's really interesting how a collaboration works.
Yeah.
And that you grew closer in your collaboration, much, much closer, right?
Yeah, because it could have been the other way around.
And
I think it's important that you have a writing soulmate and somebody that you trust. And what I mean by that is that our ego had to be taken out of this. It had to be about the character. So I could say to Marie, okay, you know, this sex scene that you've written here, we have to have a real sex scene. You can't say they went into the bedroom and closed the door. And she would be like, okay, go for it. Or she would, the scene where Belle, and I don't want to say anything because this is one of my favorite scenes in the book, where Belle and her family return to DC. One of my favorite scenes.
Yes, that was such a strong scene. Love that scene. It takes everything that we're talking about and brings it right into the room.
Brings it right home. Chapter 13. That's how much I love it.
You remember it. Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying.
Chapter in any of my other books. But the reason that I love that, we had written it a totally different way. While we were writing, we're still doing research and everything. And one day, Marie called me and she's like, Victoria, we're going to have to rewrite this scene. And so my reaction when you're writing with someone who's your soulmate is, okay, what? What did you find out? Sometimes the reaction can be, no, I wrote that scene. It's wonderful. And I was like, no, what did you find out? And we rewrote it. And that has become, like you said, that's almost the centerpiece of the book, of everything that they've gone through. She explained, I mean, it's just, I love that scene.
Yes, me too.
Second, that was a complete rewrite.
Yeah, well, great to know. One last question. They're going to come on in a second. This one is from Sheila. Did your feelings about your heroine, about Belle, evolve as your research revealed her more fully? And I would ask also, as you were writing her, did your feelings about her evolve?
No, my feelings didn't. I always understood why. Like a lot of people, but I've watched my readers' feelings evolve.
Oh, nice.
I've
Yeah.
watched people at the beginning of the book say, I don't want to read a book about passing. I
Mhm.
just don't like people that pass. They shouldn't have passed. And
Yeah.
then by the end of the book saying, you know what? I never even gave thought to the reasons and the struggles and the sacrifices. So I just came to love her more.
Yeah.
But it has been so much fun to watch the readers evolve.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's great. Well, this has been great. I think they're going to jump on. It's Katrina. Well, I guess if I have to, I'll close us out. Oh, there's Katrina. Hello.
Hi. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Always a
Thank you
little
so
delay
much,
when you press
Victoria.
the button.
So fun.
Oh, this was
Oh,
fun.
my
Thank you,
goodness.
Laurie. You had great questions. So
It
thank
was an easy book to want to know more about. Yeah.
Yes, it was amazing. I really loved this talk, and I think going by the chats, the comments in the chat, a lot of people love the talk, and they absolutely love the book.
Yes.
Victoria, it's fantastic, and we thank you for coming today, and we also thank you, Laurie, for taking the time to read the book and come up with these great questions. So
My pleasure.
thank you, and have a good rest of the day. And I'm just going to stay on and say
Bye,
a few words. Bye, Victoria. Thank you. I just wanted to tell everybody, big thanks to Victoria and Laurie for coming today on a Sunday. We have some more events coming up today. In a few minutes, we'll be having Column Toy Bean on. That is a ticketed event that you have to buy either a $10 online ticket or a $30 ticket with book. That's coming up at 2:00. And then we're going to be back at the First Congregational Church at 5 p.m. with our in-person talk with Stevie Van Zandt, and that's at 5 p.m. I just want to say a quick reminder to buy the Personal Librarian if you haven't already. There's a link just below to buy it via our independent bookstore partner, Watchung Booksellers in Montclair. Obviously, if you can't, if that's not as convenient as another bookstore, please buy it from your independent bookstore and support our bookstores, our local and independent bookstores. I wanted to thank all of our festival sponsors, some of whom I've seen are here today, our event partners, our festival friends, volunteers, and festival staff who have helped us put on the festival all day yesterday and the online events and in-person event we're having today. This has been recorded. You can watch it again, or you can recommend to your friends that they watch it via this same link, and then it will eventually be up on our YouTube channel. And have a great afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much. Bye.